Welcome to another episode of Salesforce Trails and Trials, where we help you accelerate your career and turn soft skills into hard money by mining gold from project failures, bringing insights from ecosystem experts and inspiration from others on the trail. Now joining us with over 20 years in the ecosystem, please welcome our host, Jon Cline.
Welcome to another episode of Salesforce Trails and Trials. Today we have another Trailblazer story with Jackson Hull, and we're excited to get into it. Please subscribe here because that helps us a ton show these podcast providers that people are interested in what we're doing, and we'd love for you to see every episode that we have at least once a week now for 2025. Today we're going to walk through Jackson's kind of journey from starting even before he graduated college, how he got to where he is today, some of the lessons learned along the way. And you'll learn a little bit about Starbucks, a little bit about window washing, a lot about Salesforce. And I know you'll find it a very interesting story and hopefully something you can share with others in your life, because the Salesforce job market is certainly changing. And we want to provide lots of encouragement, motivation, and inspiration for people to stay on the journey, because there's lots of opportunity and lots of ways to help people. So welcome, Jackson. Nice for you to join us today.
Thanks for having me. Super excited to be here.
So let's go back to the beginning. I think certainly the listeners can understand Jackson and I have been acquaintances and friends for some time. Jackson's dad was a good friend of mine back in my hometown of Fresno. So you might notice in the back, I have a Fresno County sign. And so that is part of why Jackson and I met, but certainly much of what he's going to talk about today is based on his own initiative, his own appetite, and his own drive. So let's go back and just talk to me about, the first time you became curious about technical things at all, about technology or anything like that. This is probably going to go back into your childhood a little bit, but I'm always curious what starts that mindset for people.
That's great. Yeah, like you mentioned, born and raised Fresno. So my background here is actually an overview of downtown Fresno. So hopefully I'll get a fancy background like you with representing the county of Fresno, painting there. I love that. But yeah, so growing up, I was always interested in technology in an entertainment sense. So I definitely grew up playing video games, watching TV, things like that. And I was a musician as well. So from a maybe more detail-oriented or interest in how things move and make sound, piano and guitar were fascinating for me. I actually started playing drums as my first instrument. And so getting to move into more of a technical knowledge base of learning piano was really fascinating to me to see how a bunch of different small things like notes can come together and make a beautiful sound, which is kind of the most interesting part, I think, about technology is learning small, seemingly independent or unrelated aspects and how they come together to make something beautiful or to make people happy. And so one of the most interesting and beneficial things to me as being a musician was I was able to play songs that other people liked. So of course I learned things that I liked, but I really enjoyed playing popular music like Journey songs or anything that are just crowd pleasers. Like when Hamilton came out, I did my best to learn all of those songs on piano so people could sing along and rap along as I played various instruments. So I think that kind of propelled me into wanting to learn things for sure in instruments or video games. I grew up playing Minecraft, so I love creative games, building games. So I think my interest in technology probably stemmed just growing up around it and playing games on my mom's iPad, looking through settings, looking through notes. I was actually a writer. When I was younger, I really liked writing for fun. So I obviously have essays that I had to write, but learning the technology to write and express my creativity that way was always fun too. So I remember when I was 8 or 9 using my mom's iPad and going to Pages or iPages to type up my fanciful stories of sci-fi and all that. So that's probably where it started.
Okay, yeah. So piano, you started to provide a platform for people so they could sing. That's kind of cool. Very cool. Now, as you think about, right, this kind of grew and you you went through school, like as you were in high school, did you take any technology classes or anything during your time there?
Yeah, great question. So I actually did kind of. So I graduated high school when I was 16, and I was at the same time doing college classes as I was high school before I graduated, so around 15 and a half to my the first part of my 10th grade year. And I did take an IS class. So I learned Excel and Microsoft, really all Microsoft products, so Word, Excel, Office, all that. And that was really interesting. And I love that because that was kind of my first intro really into any Microsoft tools or computer tools that aren't just video games or like a notepad. And so it was cool to see formulas in Excel or using transitions in PowerPoint. And actually, MS database, I had to do, or Access rather, I had to do some database learning. That was difficult. I didn't understand foreign keys or relationships or things like that. So that was kind of hard to wrap my head around some non-technical, intangible things, because a lot of the physical aspects of technology is what I had been used to, and so that was good to enter into a world of relational database. So I did take in my undergrad and getting my AA, I took an information systems class, and then in my undergrad later, I took several computer courses, but we can get to that when we get there.
Yeah, that's cool. So yeah, we're seeing a little bit of a pattern, which is nice. And so yeah, congrats on expediting your high school years and just moving on. I think that is something, right? Many people don't know that's an option. And
Yes.
so very good. And going back to your music element, it made me think of I was reading an article how, there's lots of things that exhibit a note. Like if you had a tuner next to you or something like that, there's a lot of just general noises in the world or the trash truck or whatever. And, the trash truck is basically like flat C or whatever, right?
Mhm. Yep.
Everything creates a note. But what's fascinating is if you take those same notes, the ones we know, A, B, C, D, E, right? But if you take the same notes and you just put them random, there's some brain activity. Okay, great, right? We would call that noise. But you take the same notes and you put them in, you change the order and the sequence,
Mhm.
and all of a sudden you have something like, da 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 da. Da. Okay, now that's a totally different set of movement and or kind of
Mhm.
frequency and excitement in the brain, which I always thought was fascinating because at the ear level, whether I hear those notes random in their sequence, like I do with the trash truck or anything like that, or whether I hear them in order, the
Mhm.
movements in my ear are exactly the same,
Mhm.
right? Like the hammer and the rod and all of these things in my ear, like they're exactly this. The hairs that are perceiving the sound, they're
Yeah.
exactly the same.
Yeah.
But yet, when it's done, the interpretation of that by
Mm,
my brain, when it recognizes the sequence and the order,
mm,
totally excites it in such a unique way. So it
mm.
just, to me, it continues to derive that element of when people ask about technology and you talk about music, that there's actually
Yeah.
a lot of depth and a lot of fascinating aspects of what is music and why do the modes and why does it create this kind of emotion when I do, a 6/8, right? Like you're listening
Yeah.
to music from India, for example, versus, typical music from America and 3/4, 4/4, whatever. I think it's really there's so much science and
Yeah.
tech behind what is music and what makes it tick. And so seeing my son Isaac do all of his engineering and coming up with music and all of the various ways that you can actually tune and customize music in apps like Bitwig is just really incredible.
Yeah,
Um,
that's a side of music that I've never gotten into, aside from very basic, easy drag and drop with GarageBand. So
mhm.
growing up, I would make songs on GarageBand on the Apple product and dragging the loops down or recording my own. And I never got to the really specific side of mastering the entire thing like Isaac is. And so that's a great skill to learn. And so maybe I'll have to have him teach me one of these days.
Yeah, I think you'll find it very interesting. So now you've gotten to your kind of college years and
Hmm.
you're going through school, you're learning about inclement weather and other valuable classes in your, general ed. So as you're going through college, was there anything that had any memories or things you can see there that really started to pique your interest or maybe help you pivot towards one thing or another, even towards what you thought you were going to be doing in your life and maybe, uh, other aspects about it?
Yeah, I definitely was moved to a business mindset or a desire to do something in business. So my general ed, like you mentioned, taught me wonderful things like inclement weather and that there are severe weather and moderate weather. So yeah, it was a pretty terrible semester, honestly. I had graduated, my not graduated, but I moved from my AA to California State University of Fresno. Go Dogs! So I was a Fresno State grad. That's my alma mater, and my I finally made it to the big leagues, is what I felt. And my intro to university was severe weather, and yeah, so that was quite a disappointment. But aside from the general ed, the business classes that I was taking, I decided to major in marketing. So I took a lot of marketing classes, which I specifically did because there are a lot of group projects, a lot of public speaking, and a lot of working with people. And so those three things I already knew I think I was 18 when I started going to university. So I had already developed that sense that I knew I wanted to
Mm,
things with people and in public with a business mindset. And so the finance route or the management route and high operations or being aligned with a lot of compliance things that wasn't too interesting to me. And so the creative field is really, I think, where I was most interested in. And so the marketing route definitely kind of shaped my how I developed and invested in myself when it came to creativity or versus maybe a more compliance based formulas and math kind of things. So that
hmm,
was really formative for me to see how I interact with the different fields of business. And you also have to take general education, right, with business. So I didn't just take marketing classes, right? I took HR and finance. And so
hmm.
I was exposed to these ideas and I really felt, man, HR is not for me. I couldn't do this. Props to people who can, but it really narrowed my focus. And I still loved learning all of those things, but it was great to be able to know that I was much better at a more creative and public speaking side of business.
Nice. So maybe, I'm sure your parents will listen to this podcast, so
Yes.
they're going to love hearing from you. But I'm just curious, as you're kind of going through college, did you, like many kids, they maybe enter college with some expectations at home, right?
Hmm.
Maybe there's elements. And so I think there's a very good storyline here about how to navigate that and how to go through the process of figuring out what really clicks and matches with you as you go through this process of kind of learning the ropes. I'm curious, anything you want to share about, kind of as you were going to college and, what the potential, maybe what you thought plan A might look like.
Mm.
And then we'll
Yeah.
talk about as that kind of moved along, some areas that maybe highlighted what plan B might look like.
Mm. Yeah. So, hi, mom and dad. Thanks for listening. My dad is a financial advisor, so he's been with New York Life for 20 years. And I entered into school, and the plan was for me to do the same, is to be a financial advisor, doing things like 401ks and investments, healthcare, life insurance. So, a lot of that side of financial planning, both individual and corporate. And I entered into college with that mindset. So the degree path for me was AA for transfer to Fresno State to get a marketing degree and to get an MBA. Because in the finance world, having an MBA opens up a lot of doors. And that's just true generally, but specifically with it having more, it'll unlock more doors and opportunities in the financial advising realm. And so that was the path. And I actually completed that path. I got my undergrad in marketing and an MBA. But the plan A was to become a financial advisor under my dad. And plan B came along. And now my current career path is with Salesforce, really developing the solution architect role. And so navigating interaction with parents or mentors or people who have expectations of you. And my parents are wonderful. My dad never placed that expectation on me. It was in conjunction, we had talked about what it would look like. And I truly wanted to do it. I mean, I still love personal finance. Like on the side, I'll listen to podcasts and learn, and I'm constantly asking him questions, wanting to learn more about it. And so it was never an expectation that was put upon me, but rather we both agreed. And I'm sure every father wants their son to follow in their footsteps. I have a 4-month-old, so I want him to be a Salesforce admin maybe as his first job. So, but that the conversation went really well. My parents were very gracious and understanding. But I think the path to get there is honesty and being okay with conflict, which are kind of the two things that I've been learning as a Salesforce consultant are what separates an excellent Salesforce professional from those who might need a little more work or a little more help. And so early on, it was really helpful to be in an environment where I was supported, but where I could surface this conflict, which is pretty significant, right? I mean, you think of a professional or a business owner who's planning on giving his book of business or moving his processes over to someone else, that'll affect planning. And so my dad he received it very well. And so surfacing that conflict early and surfacing that conflict with honesty and not painted walls, it was glass. So that was a couple day long
Yeah,
job.
just the bathrooms. The bathrooms weren't glass,
Yeah,
right?
that is true. The
Right.
bathrooms were glass.
Yeah, very interesting. Wow. Um, so yeah, let's talk about then now as you think through your window washing, you've gone through this, you've having these great conversations at home, and you're thinking, you know what, I think I'm gonna give Salesforce, kind of a try. So what was your observation? Where did you first hear of Salesforce? Kind of what kind of got your interest sparked there?
Yeah, so in my business classes, we had talked about CRM and we had talked about databases and managing long-term customer relationships, but a lot of the time it was just buzzwords for me. And at that point, it was so out there or non-technical, or rather intangible, that I didn't have any practice or wasn't able to put it into anything other than a quiz or just responding to a discussion post. So I think you actually were my initial, what am I trying to say here? You were my initial introduction to Salesforce because I had heard of CRM, but I think that we were camping and I asked you what you did and you told me, and I was like, this makes no sense to me, but okay, that sounds cool.
You're not alone.
And so you were saying to my parents, so when we got back from camping, I asked you more about it. You showed me, I think it was like an overview of Salesforce video, and it was showing the account as the center, and it was all the arrows were pointing to different aspects of the customer journey. And so that made more sense to me because I had been learning a customer journey or business to business and how that works with different processes in business school. And so it was helpful to actually see something and how the data behind all that interacts together. And so as soon as I saw that video, I was like, oh wow, this is really fascinating. It's kind of bringing everything that I've been learning into one spot, right? Like, because I had been learning about finance or marketing and management, sales, service, all of those sides, but in separate classes, and they were really siloed, right? So I would take marketing 100S and management 121 or
Mhm.
whichever. They didn't really interact with each other. And so the fact that there was a system and some cloudware that actually brought them all together and put them in one spot. And not only that, but there was a micro learning, a mini college, you could say, that I could go through and just learn this stuff. That was really enticing and really interesting to me.
Very cool. So I think when you took the first steps of kind of wanting to learn more about this, what I think you stepped into a program. So tell us a little bit about that, and how that helped you.
Yeah, so I entered People First Academy, and that was incredibly helpful in two ways. It really grew my technical knowledge in a supportive and mistakes can be made environment, and also my non-technical and leadership soft skills. So on the first part, I had been learning conceptually about a lot of these things, but never doing anything with them. And so going through Trailhead, but having specific trails curated to what was interesting to me was really helpful. Because when you first enter Trailhead, if you're just searching Sales Cloud, you get a lot of really great trails, but they're not really necessarily curated to what's the best thing to learn for you. So I think before I had going through some Sales Cloud things, and I was getting into CPQ, and I was getting into really product and price specific things. And this was before I really understood custom objects. I had understood apps and basic Salesforce relationship things. And so it was helpful to be in the academy, because I was told these are the trails that are gonna propel you the most toward understanding Salesforce in general, and then in a more Sales Cloud specific and general model. And so it was really helpful to have technical knowledge. And then on the implementation side, I was able to do a real-time project that wasn't with an actual client, but rather with that mimicked it, and it simulated real-time projects that you would normally interact with the client, but at a very low risk. But it still had stress and still had pressure, because I was being formed, and the diamond was coming out of the carbon in me. And so we one of the axioms there is we learn best when we're under a little duress, I think. So that was helpful for me too, because it showed me that I was capable, and it showed me that I was able under stress and under pressure to maybe find business requirements and utilize Salesforce to fulfill those. So on the technical side, that was incredibly helpful. But that can really be done anywhere. Like, I think most programs would do that, and Trailhead, certainly, if you search enough, you're going to find that. And the real benefit was really the intangible soft skill, the leadership, conflict resolution, things like that, that were grown up in me and noticed. But then you have mentors in the program that show you what you're best at and know people well enough and can analyze, if you will, or walk through with you the skills that you have and that can be sharpened, and that will really help in projects. So early on, I was never really a big fan of the PO role or the PM role. So doing project management or product owner work was not my forte. And so that was recognized early on that, okay, maybe we can develop these skills in you, certainly, so that you have a bare minimum, an adequate ability to do this, but we should really focus in on the business analyst role, specifically with a solution architect at the end. And so before I even began my Salesforce career, like before I was even making money, in this academy, my path, based on what I wanted to do and based on what my skills and abilities was kind of shown to me, that this is the technical and non-technical path that you can take to best maximize your value. And so that was incredibly helpful to have those grown in me. And that's still going on now. I've been in the Salesforce ecosystem for 4.5 years, and that's still a path that I want to take. And I'm still being developed by the same mentors and same people that really helped me early on.
Yeah, that's excellent. And I think just thinking about in the marketplace today, one of the challenges is people think about how to enter, and they can go get a Trailhead account for free. And then they go in there and they're inundated because there's just hundreds and hundreds of these potential trails and modules and super badges and projects. And there's just not a lot of clarity as to how to really make progress. And you highlight a really good point in that there's a lot of very good things that could be done for people, but time is scarce. And if time is scarce, it's really best to think about someone coming and aligning you and your skills and talents to those roles inside the Salesforce ecosystem that really best align. And then you can spend the time learning about that particular role. Now, granted, over time, it's good to learn about other roles too.
Sure.
But you got to have a priority so you can stand on your own 2 feet and really provide value. So you have the luxury now of being able to spend some time learning about what other people are going to do and how we can best hand off and, really engage them and be really good team players with them. So that's good feedback. And I think, you certainly were part of, you made some really positive contributions to the academy, and certainly everybody, who was in that cohort with you, they gained a tremendous amount as well. And so as you continued to mature, I think you gathered your first certification or two,
Hmm.
and then you were able to kind of graduate up, kind of into the next step of the journey.
Yep.
And tell us more about that.
Yeah. So after graduating the People First Academy and proving that I'm worth it, showing my value.
Which, by the way, actually, before we move on, I want to highlight that, have you ever suffered from imposter syndrome?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's certainly something that all of us have. I still have it in certain arenas, right? Where maybe I'm pushed into a new industry or something that's just a very unique challenge.
Yeah.
And I find that nobody else can cure my imposter syndrome. It's not that someone's going to put me in a
Mhm.
situation or create a kind of environment that doesn't have it. And in fact, even if they could, I don't know that I'd want it because I
Mhm.
want the challenge. I want to be stretched. I want to feel like I'm doing something, something new. I'm learning something more, and I'm getting better.
Mhm.
And the only person who can solve or at least, kind of allay my imposter syndrome concerns is myself.
Mhm.
When I prove to myself that I can do that. And so your point about learning best under duress is very true because it enables you to prove to yourself, wow, when I started this, I didn't know how I was going to finish. But now
Yeah.
at the other side, I see that I could do that again and I could actually make it better. And I'm already improving on it,
Mhm.
which is a tremendous win. And so your appetite and your diligence in following through on that process is great, and certainly a reason why you're here today. And so,
Mhm.
yes, please continue about your, kind of the next step in the process.
Yeah, so getting over my imposter syndrome, which I still have in some areas, but with the People First Academy, because this was my first introduction to Salesforce and really database design or technical things at all. And so the People First Academy taught me a lot of the technical elements, but as well as dealing with important people who make a lot of money, which is scary for, I think I was 19 or 20 at the time. And so while I had maybe the college degrees to back it up, right? I was about to graduate with my undergrad in marketing at 20. And so maybe I had the technical competency or I had the piece of paper that told me that I'm important and smart, but I didn't feel like it in a lot of areas. And so the imposter syndrome of the feeling of inadequacy, like you said, is really satisfying to, and really the intangible benefit of that and proving to yourself that you are capable with enough uh, fortitude and ability to learn and knowledge to learn that you can progress out of the academy and move into DevPod for Salesforce partners, which is where I went. So after graduating from the academy, I worked on the nonprofit side of DevPod for Salesforce partners. And so we interacted with nonprofits who needed typically Sales Cloud stand-ups. And so it was an excellent environment for me to practice and put in and implement all of the trailhead knowledge that I had, as well as the leadership and solution design aspects that I was learning and learning how to couple the product of Salesforce with the requirement that these clients had. And they're real businesses, real stakeholders. And so the importance and the stress went up a little bit, but that was good because you still learn best under duress, whether it's a nonprofit or a $50 million a year company or a mentor with a fake product or a fake project. So
Mhm.
that was incredibly helpful for me to go from stressful and not real to stressful and really real with real people who sell a real product or give a real service in the nonprofit space. And it showed me the importance of, for me, that I do something that helps people and that really changes people's lives. Like Salesforce, when used accurately, changes people's lives. It revolutionizes the way they do daily living. And that was kind of my first intro into, oh, this isn't just something that pays the bills or something that I can do because I have freedom over my time. But internally, the intrinsic ice cream, which we talk a lot about in the academy and at DevPod, that I can motivate myself by helping other people, and that Salesforce is just the tool. It's just the software to get to that end goal of more times more time hanging out with your kids, which I really value, more time, watching Star Wars with your wife or whichever, and doing
Which you
things that,
also really value.
which
Yeah.
I also really value. Yes, mainly hanging out with my wife, and then yeah, and Star Wars. But that was really instrumental into my switching from plan A to plan B, because at this point I was still wanting to be a financial advisor. I think at 20, I was 20 or 21, so a couple of years ago, I was still in college with the goal of becoming a financial advisor. And so seeing that I could still help people and still change the lives of stakeholders, middle management, frontline employees, that was really vital to affecting me going from plan A to plan B. So going from Salesforce DevPod for Salesforce partners from the nonprofit side. So once I grew a lot in my confidence and ability to deliver on business requirements, I think that's when I moved into client-facing for-profit businesses. And so I moved into kind of basic Sales Cloud implementation. And the way at DevPod, we always have at least two people on every project. That way, if someone needs to move out of the project or something comes up, projects don't halt, as well as the artifacts. So at this point, I was kind of socialized with the artifacts that DevPod uses, learning how to create test plans, which was kind of my first intro into a lot of this Salesforce work, was being a high empathy person and thinking, when I write this test plan, how is the client going to view it? And a lot of the times for these stand-ups, it was also their introduction to Salesforce. So I was kind of in the same boat as the client, which was really helpful, that I had to think like them. And how, when I see Salesforce for the first time, and I see the app launcher and the setup menu and all of these records, it's overwhelming. There's a lot on the screen. And so in my test plan, do I say, click these 9 dots in the top left, or do I provide pictures and descriptions and videos as well? Because the client might feel dumb. Like I felt dumb when I first was going through a test plan. I didn't know what any of these words meant. And so it was really helpful for me to see that clients are people too, even though they have a lot of authority and a lot of power. And they're up there in the C-suite and things like that. But they need a human sympathetic response too. And we can pour that into technology, whether it's a test plan or a solution design doc or the help text on fields or flows. There are so many avenues of the technology that we can be people first in. And that was another reason why I wanted to switch as well from plan A to plan B. But yeah, so I moved into sales DevPod for Salesforce partners on a for-profit side, getting more and more complex business requirements, moving deeper into Sales Cloud. So eventually I got to do a lot of projects with Flow. So that was incredibly fun. I think the most impactful was I didn't know any Flow, and we had a client who needed their sales process revamped, and they had a complex quoting system, and we needed to use a screen flow to capture everything from getting basic information about the customer, to building an entire quote that sometimes had 10, 15, 20 pictures and tables, rows and rows of a table of the products that their salespeople would sell. And so I was thrown headfirst into automation and expected to learn it. And that was incredibly helpful. There was a lot of duress, but I was my best then, and I got to learn a lot. And it was really helpful too, because since we always have two or more people on a project, there were people who already knew Flow that could back me up and support me when I didn't know what I was doing, which was for a lot of that, the first half of that project, I didn't know what I was doing. And so it was really helpful to exponentially learn flow and loops and screen flow data table and all of that. And so that was incredibly helpful.
Very good. And yeah, it sounds, I mean, the way that you describe the support of that, that academy, as well as the DevPod for Salesforce partners, that essentially there's a culture internally that fosters this idea of people totally being comfortable with the mystery and the fact that imposter syndrome is just here to stay.
Yeah.
and recognizing that we all have something to learn. And even what we thought we knew about Salesforce isn't true tomorrow because there's another 400 pages of release notes that
Right.
just come out. And what I thought I knew has now been revised. And that's just the reality. And so it it really does kind of build in that posture and and kind of helps you align because it's not for everyone. An
Yeah.
equally plausible and valid outcome to something like this would be I dug into this, the diversity of the work stream, the reentry cost, the complexity of relationships and
Yep.
swim lanes that I have to keep organized. It's
Yep.
just not for me. And that's okay, right? Because that's still clarity and it's going to give momentum to whatever future direction you take. And so this is I think it's a good time to just to call out for those who are looking for, kind of roles, looking to enter the Salesforce ecosystem. I believe the opportunity is still tremendous. The data shows that the marketplace is supposed to double or triple in the next 6 years. And the key, though, is that before you dive in, I just heard, for example, of somebody that went through the whole process of becoming a research scientist in the lab.
Wow.
Went through like 6 years of school. They did 2 years of kind of post doc or like I guess I'm not really, I'm a degree free guy. So doctorate and postdoc kind of training
Wow.
only to find out that she hates being in the lab.
Oh man.
Yeah, that it's just driving her crazy. And so she's going to go do 6 years more school and become a physical therapist because she just wants to work with people and help them, you
Wow.
know? And so I'm sure there's great learning in all of that, but she probably feels like, I wish I would have known now,
Yeah.
then. So a couple questions that you can ask as a aspiring Salesforce professional is to think about what are those unique dimensions of me as a person and how do they impact my role? So one element we've talked about is the product owner or project manager role
Mhm.
versus like the business analyst role. So one of which is, if you think about one is there to uncover new things. So they're curious, they're creative, they're not so interested in always coloring in between the lines. They want to understand what's beyond the lines, right? What are other colors inside the lines? What are other shapes that the lines can make? That's the business analyst role. And the product owner or the project manager typically is a little bit of the opposite. I need to respect the lines. I need to respect the swim lanes. I don't have really all the time to be creative. And so there's a natural tension between the two. And of course, right, you have to dial it up or down based on who the client is, what's the velocity, what's the budget, all those kind of things. But you can see right away that there's a foundational mindset difference between the two. And so you can see in your own life as you're thinking about what role might I be good at? Well, if you always keep your car neat and tidy, and your coins are, if you have any coins, they're like stacked up really nicely, in the little glove box of your car. And when you come in, right, you might set out what you're going to wear the day in advance. You make your lunch and you kind of make something pretty consistent every day. And your fingernails and toenails are always cut and nice. I mean, these are just examples that I observe. Then, yeah, a product owner, project manager might be really good.
Yep.
But if that's not you, and you find yourself, well, everything's awesome, except I end up having like 400 browser tabs because there's all these things that I want to like check out at some time in the future, but I don't want to get rid of them. And you're maybe a little sentimental for things, and you love being curious and find yourself going down rabbit holes. You're like, oh, that sounds really interesting, and you want to learn more about that. Those are signs of, kind of the more business analysis route. And so it's good to just see that it's not that somebody can do anything they want. Maybe they could, but I don't talk to my kids like that. I think that there are specific things that we are well suited
Mhm.
to do. And those are the things that we should look towards because that's how we're going to get the most value out of our time spent, right? Because that's really what it's about, time to value. And if you're going to exert your effort, your time, all right, that you're taking away from someone else, right? You're not spending it with your family, you're not spending it with your friends, you're taking that away. So I would encourage people to think through what is it that's unique about me
Mhm.
that can really add value and give momentum to the impact I can have in the Salesforce ecosystem. Because we're talking about projects, but there's still a host of other things. I mean, there's ISV products, and there's training and enablement, and
Right.
there's so many roles in the Salesforce ecosystem. Now we see it across security and across compliance and across all the industries, and there's so many opportunities that can take advantage of that prior experience and knowledge. So you bring up several good points there. I just wanted to highlight for the listeners as they think through some of those key questions to ask of themselves, and to try and find themselves some kind of a mentoring program, whether that's the People First Academy, or maybe it's Talent Stacker, maybe it's a program with Mike Wheeler. There's a lot of really good people. There's the Clicked program just was acquired, but it's still around, and there's lots of these avenues for people to take advantage of. If you're a vet, you can, consider like Maravis, or lots of good stuff. So please feel free to send us a note if you want to know anything more about that. We're glad to help. But let's continue as you talk through now, right? You're on kind of the commercial team working for DevPod
Yep.
for Salesforce partners. And yeah, you've been able to work across these variety of projects. And as kind of you mentioned artifacts a little bit, you mentioned some of these aspects. So you were actually, part of this kind of transition of, taking some of this insight that you were given as part of the mentoring program and really transforming it into something that could be then made available to people
Mhm.
outside of those programs.
Yes.
Right. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so this is probably the most exciting part of my career, that we made formal, if you will, or put into process, and made available for anyone that is like me, the people first method, which is what we're calling kind of this cohort and mentorship program, that every other program teaches you the technical. It teaches you, you pay the 250 bucks and you get the cert voucher, and you go through and read all the literature about what a flow is and automation and whichever, whether it's admin or platform dev one, there's technical programs for all of that. And that's great. That's certainly necessary. But the exciting part for me was to be in on the ground, the development of the program for the soft skills and the non-technical side of things, which Trailhead doesn't touch on, and which a lot of these other programs won't really mention as well. But they're so vital to project completion. And I love the series you have, the Tales from the Fails, because you had mentioned in the first episode of the Tales from the Fails that no one talks about their failures. You don't mention, oh yeah, I'm a Salesforce admin 20 years. I had these bombastic failures. We did this and it totally didn't work. But those things are the most valuable because someone else listening to them or reading a case study on them can see the failure and then not do it and save themselves sometimes millions of dollars, right? These massive ERP projects or the significant projects are costly. And so, even more so in a small environment with small to mid-sized businesses, which typically is where I've interacted, the people first method, uh, being able to enable that and put into processes, and write some of the content for, learn how to do maybe some back admin work in WordPress and things like that to enable this so that other people can go through a cohort of 10, 11, 12 other people who are like-minded, who want to learn, and are being given specific weeks of content that really are designed to make you a better Salesforce professional in a soft skills and in a leadership kind of way. Because it talks about things like what to do when conflict arises, or how to bring up conflict well, how to make sure that you're continuously learning and developing yourself in all areas of your life, what to do when clients call you names or ask crazy things of you, when they're really bringing up conflict in a way that they're trying to grind you down and get free stuff from you, or deride you or your team. And this course, which I got in an informal way over the 4 years, it's really helpful because I went through the initial cohort to get it all in 6 months, and it's incredible. We talk about putting on our people first glasses, and now I have like I regularly use the titles of the chapters in my interactions with people, and so I'll say things like, okay, one of the weeks is a firewalling the frenzy, and so I'll tell myself, okay, this anxiety-inducing situation is bearing down on me. I need to firewall the frenzy. And I know I think you had mentioned this in the interview with Jeff, that our graduates have put on their computer screen or above on their wall some of these axioms that are vital to them. Another one is consultative, not compliant. I am not what's the menu taker axiom?
Yeah,
What's that called?
be a menu maker, not an order taker. Yeah.
I am not a menu maker. Nope. I'll go back. I am not an order taker. I'm a menu maker. And so having consultative, not compliant, in somewhere where I can see it is incredibly helpful. And so it was really fun and kind of solidified my role in moving in the Salesforce professional and aspiring to become a coach in the People First method. That I was able to be uh, in the ground team that presented this to the first cohort, and now the many other cohorts that are in the future or in progress. And so that was vital to my Salesforce experience, being a part of it in a learning sense as a student, and now as a coach in the future. I think is kind of what I'm most excited to develop that leadership role and pass that on and mentor other people who are similar to me.
Hmm. Now, talk about, a lot has happened with AI over the last year, especially in the last 6 months.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, just from your perspective, as you see, uh, the growth of AI, and certainly a lot of kids your age are,
Yep.
pretty well versed because, you were into video games and kind of saw these things and were experimenting early. How do these things, do you feel, kind of impact the kind of your role as AI continues to, enter the space across all aspects of a Salesforce project?
That's a great question. I had some AI classes actually in one in undergrad and then one in postgrad in the MBA program. And we did a lot of things with predictive, with advanced neural networks and machine learning for predictive aspects. And ChatGPT had come out at this point, and there was a lot of generative stuff. Obviously, the schools were all scared that everyone was just copying, pasting the prompt, and then submitting that in the ChatGPT. And while that's certainly incredible, the impact at that point had not hit maybe more of the back end Salesforce area. And so I think two of the major areas that AI are and will continue to erode are the admin setup and development, right? So you definitely talked about this on the show, and this is kind of the feel in the air. Lots of articles have been written about this, but the ability for AI to access back-end metadata based on a prompt is already there. There's products that already do that, that can do things that surface level admins can do. And then even more advanced development things, utilizing ChatGPT, who ChatGPT understands Apex, it knows Apex. And so you can ask it to write a test class for a class you already have. It can develop the Apex class and test class itself, any trigger. It's incredible the amount of ability that it has. And so this is kind of, for the most part, common knowledge about what the capabilities of generative AI are. But it is going to significantly erode a purely technical admin or a purely technical developer. And so I think developing in yourself the leadership qualities that will set you apart from AI is vital in a way that generative AI will never be able to do. Generative AI will never be able to take on the leadership, the personal empathetic and relational abilities that admins or developers have, right? We kind of typically a back end or a technical person isn't the extrovert, right? Typically, they're more introverted, and so I've seen and loved working with the many introvert people in projects and learned much from them in leadership ways. And so I think developing those skills so that your value proposition isn't I know how to code and I know how to set up custom objects, because those aren't as valuable as they were 10 years ago. Setting yourself apart by being a strong leader, being able to surface conflict, by being able to be empathetic not only to the client but to your own team, by being a papa or mama bear for your own team and protecting them from the harsh things that the client says. These are aspects that companies will always need, because the team aspect of being on a project and interacting with both the client, both your boss or the owner of the systems integrator that you work with, is going to be vital, especially in the next coming 6 months to a year, because of how fast everything is moving with Agentforce, how fast Prompt Builder is going, how fast the products that you can just type in a prompt and set up entire Sales Cloud systems. And so really delving into non-technical leadership cohorts and programs, I think is going to be the thing that will set you apart and makes your value proposition so much more valuable and so much higher than purely technical, high cert count people.
Yeah, well, it's a great endorsement. It's interesting. I mean, in the last 2 weeks, if I was at Architect Dreamin' and then I was at Cactus Force, in the last 2 weeks, I've met at least three different people who are making AI tools related to the consultant or admin experience. And that's just the three people I've met. So there's got to be, anecdotally, that means that there's a lot of work going on beside the products like Metazoa,
Yep.
which, their episode will have come out a week or two prior to this one. So it's good endorsement, good feedback. And it reminds me of two quotes from really, I guess, third-party mentors of mine over the years. So one is a gentleman named Peter Drucker, who was an economist and thought to be the grandfather of management consulting. And he states that the worst thing an organization can do is to do the wrong things really well.
Yeah.
And AI is not always or not often going to have really good insight into what you should or should not do.
Mm.
Right? It's just not going to have that kind of, because those considerations are not, they're not technical. They're not just a summary of some piece of information. There's reasoning that spans the offline or the relational dynamics inside of an organization, inside people. It evaluates their political will. It evaluates their trust. Those are things that AI cannot pick up on. There just are not, there's not enough data, not enough sensors, not enough ability
Right.
to to synthesize all of that. The second one is by a gentleman named Thomas Sowell, and he says that intellect is not wisdom. And I think that's also very important, is the ability to look at a wide array of information, including things that AI creates, documents, summaries, outlines, whatever, and be able to discern what is the wisdom I can bring to this
Mm.
conversation, right? Based on prior experience and a curated nature of that prior experience. It's
Mm.
not just a general summary, which is a survey of everything that was available or what the prompt, omitted, but somebody has to make a decision back again in a curated sense of who is involved here, who am I speaking to, what are the hot button issues that they're concerned about, how can I make this persuasive in the process. There's just a lot there. So I really do agree with you and believe in that kind of people first power
Mm.
in the age of AI, and would agree that as AI erodes some of the rudimentary or repetitive aspects
Mm.
of our work, that we need to build essentially new real estate on our island into areas that really escalate outside the bounds of where AI will likely ever be able to get. And as much as people love agents for their repetitive tasks or whatever, if you think about, hey, I want to go have a drink to celebrate, right? Or I have this really pressing problem that I want to figure out, most people are going to want to go hang out with somebody they know,
Yeah.
not with an agent to do
Yep.
that, Uh,
Agreed. Yeah,
so,
you kind of touch on a vital aspect of
mhm,
differentiating yourself. It's really all about relationships and really being able to delve deep into long-term value adding relationships because a lot of the time we think the value that we add to a client's uh, or a project is our technical acumen. And we need to shift that thinking because the value that agents are bringing is purely the technical. But
mhm,
like you said, I don't want to go get a drink with ChatGPT or go smoke a cigar with ChatGPT when I complete a project, right?
mhm,
I'm going to go hang out with my friends or my family and delve deep into those relationships. And I think that's a vital lesson, probably one of my favorite and most impactful lessons from People First Method is landing for the long term. That our goal should be to continuously provide value to the client because great delivery yields future delivery. And so if we provide overwhelming value to the client and we're not just trying to do it to make money to get our our bottom line, but to make the product serve the people, then that's going to change, I think, the way you think about yourself and the way that people perceive you as well because you can tell when you start thinking when you put your people first glasses on, you can tell there are people who only consider themselves technically valuable, and part of me aches for them who I know that there's so much more out there, and you can come to this side and be a value adding person in the relationship aspect.
mm.
And so that's something that I want to highly compliment you, Jon, on that you were vital in me developing that and understanding that for myself. And so I would highly recommend anyone to follow the same path I did, whether it's jumping straight into People First Method, or if you're just considering Salesforce career to go through the People First Academy, and going through those two really made me a more valuable person. And I just play better when I'm on Jon's team. And that's something that changed my life. And so I highly recommend going through those things because they're just excellent.
Wow. Well, I appreciate the endorsement, and certainly for anyone listening, uh, take Jackson's advice. I've shared other resources as well that are analogs that, right, we don't have the capacity to serve everybody who might be listening to this, but there are a select few we are able to serve and are grateful for that, and want to continue walking with people through this changing environment. I've been in it 24 years. And it's been a life changer for me, and it's been a delight to work with you in these various capacities over the last 4+ years. And, not to mention all the camping trips and such,
Yeah,
focusing on relationships before that. And so it's been great to kind of walk through your Trailblazer story, and we look forward to more in the future on your journey to be a solution architect.
yeah,
And one who, yes, has those people first dimensions, as every solution architect should be considering, and every architect for that matter. And so wonderful. So I think that wraps it up for us today. Thank you so much for your time.
great. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us on another episode of Salesforce Trails and Trials. If you found this episode valuable, we would love your help reaching others. Please subscribe, leave us a 5-star review, and share this with another who would benefit.